guys. Um, Sorry, I gotta whisper again. There's still some people living here. So I haven't done a video in a while, so today I wanted to do a deck review rather than another lessons that I've learned based on what I've experienced throughout my lifetime. So today I want to review this deck here. This is the Starseed Oracle by Rebecca Campbell and Danielle Noel. This was I think the last deck that these two collaborated on, this is the box by the way, but this was the last deck that these two collaborated on before they split. The first one was the Work Your Light Oracle. So this is the second one before they split. Um, this could be found at, let me turn the box the other way. This could be found at both Barnes& and Noble, Books A Million. You can also find this on Amazon. But you know me, I highly recommend that you go to Hay House because you can get the best deals on certain card decks from there. For this, I actually got this from Barnes and Noble. In the US, it's around $25. In Canada, it's around like $34. But I got this from Barnes and Noble. This is what the box itself looks like. It's actually designed to, you know, hold cards inside the deck like this. I personally do not use it like this because I don't know, I just don't see the point, at least for me personally. It's just good decoration at best. So I just use it to store the cards. Now, to start it off here, before I actually get into the meat of this review, I just want to say that this is the third time I have actually worked with this deck. The first two times that I have bought this deck, I couldn't connect with it. There was just, maybe it just wasn't the right time. Maybe that was it. I guess it wasn't the right time, but the first two times that I bought this deck, I just felt blocked. Like I could not connect with this deck at all. So the first two times I just kind of gave up after that and was just like, I guess this deck is not for me. Well, last year I saw this deck again and I pretty much was just asking my ancestors and the creator, hey, look, I don't want to waste my money on this deck again if I can't connect to it. Can I use this deck? Can I connect to it? And they said yes, it is a good time. So I bought this deck for the third time, and ever since then, I've been able to connect to it very, very easily. So there's that. So, like I said, this is the third time that I have actually worked with this deck, and since then, it's been so easy to read from it. So this is the box. All right, gonna move that aside. This is the guidebook. Guidebook is very extensive. The pictures in here are black and white. They even show you typical. It's what you would expect from a guidebook. It gives you the card meanings, which are pretty straightforward, but they also leave room to interpretation. So I'm just gonna put that aside. Now the cards themselves. If you know Danielle Noel, you know her artwork, and I'm not ashamed to say that I'm a huge fan of her artwork. It was this deck and the Work Your Light deck which drew me to Miss Noel's artwork in the first place. These are the backs of the cards, which very pastel, very space-like. I like it. I just like it. Okay. And these are the cards themselves. Cardstock, cardstock isn't that bad. It's what you would expect from, you know, if you use like Hay House decks the majority of the time, the card stock is what you would come to expect. I believe it's also the same card stock for like every one of Rebecca Campbell's decks, but card stock isn't really something to complain about. It's easy to work with. Doesn't poke it. It's not so stiff. It doesn't poke into my hands, and I have small hands. But here are the cards here. So like I said, I've been using this deck for quite some time, and I say I really, really like it. The messages that I get from this deck, they're very easy to interpret. Sometimes, again, I'm at the point where I don't even need the guidebook. So the messages that I get from this deck are very spot on. They're mostly spot on messages. Sometimes they're the exact messages that you would get if you were looking through the guidebook, but they have extra details in them depending on which cards that you get. Okay? So, for example, this card, Jump In. Very straightforward. Very, very straightforward. Actually, I didn't even know that was an I. I didn't even know that was an I. That's interesting. But this card, for example, hey, jump in, say yes, make that change, right? But it can also mean, or let's say I get in a reading, it doesn't also just mean, hey, jump in, make yes to change. It could also mean maybe you're afraid of making this change because you're unsure of what the next um, of what the results may be. Or maybe you're afraid to make that change because you've gotten too comfortable where you're at. And maybe this is the time that you need to leave your comfort zone. So, just a good example of that. Like you get the message that's shown on the card, but then you get additional messages on top of that. And that's the case with this deck here. Um, I say this deck is really good for hmm, I'm not going to say daily pulls. Unfortunately, I'm somebody that doesn't really do daily pulls, to be honest. But this deck is really, really good for like weekly personal readings. If you're somebody like me who does weekly personal readings, this is a good deck for you. Okay, this is a good deck for that. Um, if you identify as a star seed, or the different types of star seeds, or even as a light worker, this is a good deck for you. This kind of runs up your alley. The energy from this deck that I get is mostly outworldly, galactic. I don't think galactical is a word, so I'm going to say galactic. It's very mystical, like you're connected to you're connected to what's beyond this planet, like something different. Again, like I said, if you identify yourself as a star seed or even as a light worker, this is the deck for you. It's very galactic, very outworldly energy. Would I say that it's high vibrational? Mm, somewhat. Just somewhat. Wouldn't say that it's completely high vibrational energy, like let's say the Gateway of Light Activation Oracle by Kyle Gray, but it's near that point. I say it's like a little bit of a step down from Kyle Gray's deck that I reviewed the last time. But yeah, this deck is really good. I like the energy from it. It's very calming, reassuring, but it lets you know that there's something out there that's bigger than where you're at. And it just gives you this comfort knowing that even though it's way bigger than where you are right now, you still have a chance that you're still part of it and you're not alone. I don't remember how many cards was in this deck. There are 53 cards in this deck, so it's much bigger than the previous deck. Okay. I would say that it's probably the biggest deck that Rebecca Campbell has right now. I don't remember how many cards are in the previous decks here. I do like this one. You're Not For Everyone. This is a big one. Kind of brings me back to a card from the previous deck. I don't remember the name of the title of that card, but it reminds me of that. But this energy from the deck is just, even though you're part of something really, really bigger than the world you're in right now, you're not alone. There are tons of other beings out there that are with you and they support you. And also, in a way, it kind of taught me to just rely on my own energy, so to speak. I'm hoping all this makes sense to you. Now, again, like I said, getting back onto Miss Noel's artwork, If you're familiar with her artwork, you're gonna like it. And like I said, I'm a huge fan of her artwork, so this is pretty much just gorgeous. Really, really, really gorgeous. So I have no complaints about the artwork here. Yeah, honestly, I use this deck mostly to, like I said, do weekly readings for myself. If I feel called to pull a card from this deck, maybe even two cards from this deck, this is the one that I reach for. So, in terms of pairing it up with another deck, hmm, I suppose it could work with the previous deck, Work Your Light. I don't know because I didn't work with both of these together. I've been working with this by itself most of the time, but I can't really say which deck would be a good pair with this one. I would say by itself, it's really, really good. So, by itself, it's a good deck. I don't know what other deck I can pair it up with. Well, okay, maybe to an extent, you can probably pair this up with the Gateway of Light Activation Oracle by Kyle Gray. You could pair it up with that deck, but ultimately, I would say this is a deck that it's best used by itself, especially for weekly personal readings. So even though I have used this deck for alongside other card decks, this is a deck where I would say, in my opinion, it's best used by itself because I think your readings get more intense the more that you use it. So I have no complaints about this deck. I love it. Now that I've been able to fully work with it after getting permission, even for the third time, I love this deck. I will continue using it until it falls apart. I have no complaints about it. So if you've been following me for a minute, you know that I like to pick out my favorite cards from the decks here. Okay, so here we go. These are my favorite cards. See if y'all can see them. But these are my favorite cards here from this deck. Let me put it here. And I actually went through this deck a few times just to make sure that the cards that I selected here were my actual favorites, which one stood out the most. I would say, now out of all of these cards, I would say that the two ones that stood out to me the most would be this one, Forge Don't Follow, and this one. This was actually the first card that stood out to me when I first started working with, when I actually started working with this deck. This one, Lightworker Starseed, Serve the World by Being You. Pretty card. But that one stood out to me the most. I personally like this one because it teaches you that certain problems and issues and situations that you're pressed about in this lifetime, they're not really going to matter. If you zoom out on everything, as this card says, if you realize what's out there from this planet, you'll realize that most of this, that sometimes the problems that you're experiencing just don't really matter. That too, this too will pass. It will soon pass. And I like that card. Very perspective. But these are my favorite cards out of all the decks because the artwork on here by Miss Noel is just phenomenal. I love the cool tones of the colors here and just the messages that I get from these cards are pretty intense. They're not just surface level. And I would say, I would argue that this is the case with this deck alone, if I didn't mention it before. A lot of the messages aren't really surface level. Like I said earlier, you'll get the message that's on the cards here, but you'll get more additional messages on top of that when you really, really, really work with it and you tap in. So I don't have, all in all, I have no complaints about this deck. I love it. 5 out of 5. Would gladly use it. Now that I've had a chance to really connect with it, I will use it until it falls apart. Same as my other decks here. Same as the last two decks that well, three decks that I've actually filmed. So I have no complaints about this. If you've used this deck before, tell me how it worked for you in the comments below. If you like my review, thumbs up is always appreciated. And I'll see you guys in the next video. I hope everybody is doing okay. I hope you are taking good care of yourselves. If you happen to be in Florida like I am, please stay hydrated and stay in the shade. We're going through a heat wave. Okay? Stay hydrated, stay in the shade, stay safe. All right? I'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, everyone.